I'm gonna mute myself.
All right, go ahead. All right, well, welcome back, everybody, to Science and Orthodoxy. And so today we'll be starting off with a bang by talking about the Big Bang. And just a slight disclaimer, the previous initial statements about my views and opinions that were mentioned in the first class still apply to this one as well, and for the entire lecture series. So let's begin by talking about what the Big Bang Theory is. So it is the prevalent theory about how the universe was created. Now, let's start with a little bit of a review of what the term theory even means. So a theory, as we discussed last time, is a broad explanation of events backed by a wealth of evidence that makes valid predictions. And so that's what a theory is. So let's move forward with that understanding. And so the Big Bang Theory was developed by a Roman Catholic priest and cosmologist, the Reverend Dr. George Lemaitre, in the 1920s. And so what he basically noticed through various mathematical calculations and observations was that the universe was expanding. And so he proposed a way of explaining this expansion by using Einstein's theories on relativity, and he solved the equations to come to this conclusion that the universe was expanding from an initial explosion of matter, and which was called the Big Bang. And so he stipulated that all the matter in the universe was condensed into what's known as a singularity. A singularity is effectively just a point in space with infinite mass and density. Basically, you have all the stuff of the universe shoved into a single point. And in this singularity, all the physical laws that govern our reality today are kind of condensed and sort of commingled and don't really operate in the same way as they do now. Likewise, space and time aren't exactly linked in the same way that they are now. And the singularity. And so this singularity is what he called the primeval atom. And this singularity, with having pretty much the entire universe shoved into a single point, was very unstable. It contained all of this stuff, this matter, and this heat and energy. And what occurred was the largest explosion known to the universe of the Big Bang, where it exploded out into reality. And so the heat of the explosion reached 10 billion degrees Fahrenheit, or 5.5 billion degrees Celsius if you're like the rest of the world and use the Celsius as opposed to Fahrenheit. And so this initial explosion contained a mass of matter and energy, which is called the quark-gluon plasma. We can actually recreate this initial plasma in Geneva, Switzerland. CERN happens to have several supercolliders, and the largest of which is entitled the Large Hadron Supercollider, which basically what they do is they take particles and just move them at relativistic speeds, speeds close to light, and smash particles together. And so at these high speeds and energy, they can basically recreate this quark-gluon plasma for observation and study, further proving the theory to be true. Likewise, it also contained a massive amount of light and radiation in this initial explosion. And so the light that was from the Big Bang is actually still observable today, although it doesn't exist as visible light that we can actually see. It's what's known as cosmic microwave background, or CMB. I'll touch a little bit more on this in the coming slides, but let's just put a pin in that for now. And so all of this initial explosion occurred in 1 × 10⁻43 seconds. And I know most people aren't used to reading numbers in scientific notation, but if you were to write this number out, it would be 0 with a decimal point, and then 42 zeros, and then a 1 second, which is about as close to an instant as you could possibly get. This is an incredibly short amount of time when all of this initial explosion occurred. And so after this initial explosion, there was a period of rapid homogeneous expansion, which is known as inflation. Homogeneous is a term denoting a uniform composition mixture. So basically, it uniformly expanded out from this initial explosion. And so after this initial explosion, and as time went on, the energy that was from this initial explosion was lost, and as the universe cooled down, and then the highly energetic matter that was there condensed to form protons, neutrons, and electrons. These particles basically make up atoms, which are the fundamental building blocks of matter. And atoms are organized into elements. An element is a substance that can't be decomposed by chemical processes, and it's organized on a periodic table of the elements. In your handout, I provided a copy of the periodic table of elements, which has the organization of the elements that we discovered and know about on there. Specifically to the right is an image of the periodic table entry for hydrogen, which provides a wealth of information for scientists, physicists, and for use in various things. And likewise, the first two elements that were created after the initial Big Bang were hydrogen and helium, the first two elements on the periodic table, and the simplest two. And so all of this occurred about 380,000 years after the Big Bang. And the predicted composition of these two elements are 75% hydrogen and 25% helium by mass. And these predictions have later been able to be proven true with various studies. And so after the initial formation of atoms, specifically hydrogen and helium, then came stars. And so this occurred about 180 million years after the Big Bang. And then once stars were formed, then galaxies were formed then after that at 400 million years later. And so as these stars form, these stars do nuclear fusion. What I mean by this is they take atoms and smash them together by shoving them together, which creates new elements, more complex elements. And then stars are born, they make more elements, and then they die and explode and basically produce more and more atoms and elements that are the building blocks of matter. And this occurred throughout time until the formation of our galaxy, the Milky Way, which is our home. The right-hand picture is a depiction, it's an artist's depiction of what we know of our home galaxy, the Milky Way. And you can see on there where we are, which is shown where the sun is. And our galaxy is a spiral galaxy, and we are in one of the arms of that spiral galaxy. And so the universe is determined since the Big Bang to be 15 billion years old. And likewise, planet Earth, our home that we live on, is been determined to be 4.55 billion years old. Now, how do we arrive at these numbers? The age of the universe was arrived at by observing the cosmic microwave background and basically seeing what wavelength it is at now versus what's proposed to be at the initial explosion. Furthermore, cosmologists try and find the oldest thing that they can see in the sky. And if they find the oldest thing, the universe has to be older than that. It's just a very logical premise that the universe cannot be younger than the oldest thing that exists within it. Likewise, the same holds true for the Earth, but we primarily use radioactive dating for this. And we use various isotopes of radioactive isotopes like uranium-238, potassium-40, and uranium-235. And so how does this radioactive dating even work? So basically you have an element that is unstable. And so it decomposes into another element. And this process of decomposition takes a certain amount of time. And effectively, this decomposition acts like a molecular clock, or rather an atomic clock, in that the amount of time it takes to decompose is set. And this is known as a half-life. So basically you have a set amount of material. The amount of time it takes to make that material decompose to half of it is known as a half-life. And these have set values that have been determined that don't really change based off of various stressors and environmental factors. And so they are a very good source of how to determine age of our planet Earth. And so the age of the Earth isn't really something that's that highly debated within science. And so this is just a pictorial representation of everything I just said, with the left-hand side of the picture being the initial Big Bang, and on the top hand of the ray going to the right-hand side is the time and the duration, while the bottom hand is the proposed temperature of the universe at that time. As you can see, it started out very hot and has since cooled as matter has coalesced into the forms that we see it today, leading all the way to us. And so initially, after the Big Bang Theory was proposed, there was some scientific opposition to it. Not everybody liked it, especially because a Roman Catholic priest proposed it. So many scientists actually believe that the universe had no beginning, that it just always was. And this led to the steady state theory in 1948, which effectively stipulated that the universe was expanding in perpetuity and that matter was constantly being generated and there was no set definite beginning. Furthermore, Albert Einstein, whose theories on relativity were used to arrive at the Big Bang Theory, honestly thought that the universe was static. He later changed his mind on that after talking to the Reverend Dr. Lemaitre and discussing the Big Bang Theory with him. He later changed his mind, but initially he thought he opposed it as well. And likewise, this isn't actually a new idea in science or the world, that the universe just always was. Many pagans actually believed that the universe was made out of pre-existent stuff, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the coming slides. Likewise, many people actually opposed the Big Bang Theory because they saw it as too religious. They thought it aligned too well with Christian beliefs on the creation of the world, and that it started out with light, as is seen in Genesis chapter 1, the first day of the creation of light and darkness, and that it was basically created in an instant, much like it says in Genesis, of stating that God created with merely just a word of just his command caused creation to occur. And so that's why people really opposed it, was because they didn't like it because of that, which is very surprising coming from today, where people often view the Big Bang Theory as being in direct opposition to Christianity. So let's talk a little bit about the support for this theory, because like I said before, the theory is backed up by evidence and makes valid predictions. And so the theory effectively stipulated that there should be the light from the Big Bang still out and about. And so this is known as cosmic microwave background. It was discovered in 1965, actually on accident. It was first off discovered on accident and later confirmed to be actually what it was. And so basically, like I said, the initial light and radiation from the Big Bang has cooled down and since redshifted. What do I mean by that? Redshifted effectively means to be cooled down, because red on the visible light spectrum is the coldest color, effectively. As you see on the image to your right-hand side of the screen, you see the electromagnetic spectrum, with which light is a part of. On the left-hand side, you see the lower forms of energy, whether they be radio waves, which transmit information to play music in our cars, all the way to the right-hand side, which is the more energetic side of gamma rays, which are used in various medical processes, or if you're in Marvel Comics and Bruce Banner, to turn yourself into the Hulk. And so the light from the initial Big Bang has since cooled down and gone from the right-hand side to the left-hand side, and whereas it is right now is found in the microwave region of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is the same region of the electromagnetic spectrum that our microwaves of the same name cook our food. And so furthermore, NASA has been able to launch several satellites and observe this phenomenon and confirm it and observe it more since its initial discovery, further cementing this theory. And so I would like to talk a little bit about Orthodox views on creation and how they actually very much align with the Big Bang Theory, and how the Big Bang Theory, when viewed from an Orthodox framework, is actually heightened and better understood. And so I would also like to begin this discussion by stating that I'm not including angels here. Angels are a part of the created world, and were created by God, but I'm not really discussing them because science can't exactly prove them. Or science, there's no experiment or study that I could possibly do that could empirically prove the existence of angels or demons or any of the spiritual beings that we know to be true and exist. So I'm going to effectively leave them out of my discussion. If you want to learn more about the creation of angels, you could look at the Lord of Spirits podcast, which goes in depth into angels and demons by two priests who used to be our assistant priest here in Charleston. And so in Orthodoxy, there's no one set view on how the universe was created. Like I said, science primarily deals with the how questions, while Orthodoxy deals primarily with the why questions. And so let's deal with some of these why questions. Furthermore, our understanding of creation dogmatically is stated in the first line of the creed. We state, I believe in one God, Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible. And so in this dogmatic statement, we say that God created everything we could see, everything in the world, the spiritual and physical realities that we interact with. He created all, and not just one person of the Trinity, the entire Trinity. And so we derive this information from chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis. Likewise, the first chapter of the Gospel according to John. You may be wondering why I'm including John in this. Does John talk about creation? Well, what he does state in the first verse is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so the Word, in this case, is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Logos, the second person of the Holy Trinity. And so taken together with chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis, we understand that God, who is Trinity, created the world in the beginning and is still working in it today. And so, like I said, it's not just one hypostasis. Hypostasis is a theologic term effectively meaning person. So it's effectively talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, each of which are persons of the Holy Trinity. And according to St. Basil, the hypostases can be seen as the personal attributes in the triune divinity. Furthermore, the Holy Trinity brought the world into existence as well as mankind out of love, because God is love. Furthermore, in Orthodox theology, there's a strong separation between creator and created. This is seen effectively in St. Gregory Palamas in discussing the essence and energy of God, and that God's essence is completely unknowable by man, but we can experience and participate in his energies. This somewhat gets turned a little bit upon its head in the incarnation of Christ, because Jesus Christ is fully God and fully man. He took upon our humanity while retaining his full divinity. And in Greek, this is called theanthropos, coming from the two terms of theos meaning God and anthropos meaning man. This is actually where we get the term anthropology, is dealing with the study of man from the term anthropos. So because he is the God-man, fully God and fully man. Likewise, another fundamental tenet of the Orthodox theology on creation is that it's ex nihilo. What this means is it literally translates to out of nothing. This is a Latin phrase. And we derive this from 2 Maccabees 7:28, where it's stated, I beseech you, my child, to look at heaven and earth and see everything in them, and know that God made them out of nothing. So also he made the race of men in this way. Furthermore, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3, it is stated, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. And so this is basically telling us that God created out of nothing, rather than some pre-existent stuff or matter. He didn't go to Lowe's and then buy all kinds of wood to build trees. He just spoke and they were created. So let's talk a little bit about Genesis specifically, because there's definitely a lot of, obviously this is where creation occurred. And so I really do want to say that the account of creation in Genesis is not written like it's a science textbook, and it's not a literal account of creation. It doesn't read like a scientific textbook. It doesn't explain it. It speaks more of theology and a cosmology as opposed to a specific mechanistic of how this all occurred, and where this goes to this and then this forms into that. It doesn't read like that, and it's not written that way. Furthermore, to further prove this, there are two creation stories in Genesis, which both differ significantly. The first of which can be found in chapter 1 of Genesis, where you see the 6 days of creation plus the seventh day where God rested. This is often cited and looked at, but there's a second one in chapter 2 of Genesis. Well, the first story goes into a little bit of chapter 2, but in chapter 2, the rest of chapter 2 of Genesis talks about creation from a different perspective. The first, from creating man first and then the rest of creation, while in chapter 1 of Genesis, God creates the universe itself in a stepwise ordered manner, with man being last, while in the second story, man is first. So it's very much a different perspective of events, which further shows that it most likely is not a literal accounting. Likewise, St. Basil and Gregory of Nazianzus. A little side note, Gregory of Nazianzus is another title and effectively another name for St. Gregory the Theologian. So if you ever see St. Gregory of Nazianzus, we mean, or whoever is talking about it means St. Gregory the Theologian. But I digress. They quote Origen and a collection of the writings of Origen's writings, and they use this by stating, by means of seeming history, through the incidents never occurred, figuratively reveal certain mysteries. And so this further compounds and gives evidence to the fact that the accounts in Genesis are not literal, but they show a much deeper theological meaning. Likewise, the Bible is an ancient Near Eastern text, so it can be read in a similar manner, because it was written in time with the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. But many of the phrases and statements used within there are common to that region and other writings and the beliefs of that writings, beliefs of those peoples in that time, which I'll go into a little bit more later. And if anybody is also a fan of the Lord of Spirits, as I've referenced previously, you can see the Bible as a correction to the pagan myths of the Bible's contemporaries, whether it be Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian myths. Those can be seen as pagan propaganda, and the creation stories in Genesis as a correction to those. Well, what do I mean by that? I mean that pagans often believe that creation rose out of pre-existent stuff, not out of nothing, but out of pre-existent matter, whatever it may be, whether it was chaos, water, and or earth. A specific example of this can be found in Sumerian myth, where there was a pre-existent sea called Namu, and out of it a mountain arose, which the bottom was called Earth, or Ki, and the heaven On, or An. And then the god Enlil, the god of the air, was birthed later from the space in between. And so in this manner, the pagan myths show that gods were made out of creation, rather than God himself creating everything, creating all the creation. And so there's a very significant difference that exists between these two. Likewise, let's talk a little bit about the 6 days of creation. And I put days in quotation marks for specific meaning, in that we don't actually know what a day means in chapter 1 of Genesis. What do I mean by this? I mean that in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, it's stated, "But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day." So we really don't actually understand the concept of what a day actually means. Furthermore, the 6 days of creation and then the 7th day where God rested occurred. But now we're living in the 8th day, the day of resurrection, because Christ has died and risen from the dead, and we live in this eternal day. That's actually why our holy day of the week, the day that we come to the church and celebrate the divine liturgy in parish practice, is on Sunday, because it's the day of resurrection. It's the day that Christ rose from the dead, and this day will continue on until the glorious second coming of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Furthermore, St. Augustine can also provide a bit more of an understanding of what days actually mean. According to him, days were a literal day, but as a literary device, so that it conveys a unit of organization. And we'll go into this a little bit more detail in the next slide. Furthermore, St. Gregory of Nyssa thought that creation was instantaneous, as is seen in the first verse of chapter 1 of Genesis, in stating, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." And then the days that follow it were effectively carried out as a natural ordering of creation out from this initial beginning. So let's talk about days of creation. And so on the first day, light and darkness were made, and the light was called day and the darkness night. And then on the second day, the waters were made, the firmament above and below. And so I'll actually go a little bit more into what firmament means in the next slide, because I have a very interesting pictorial representation of the ancient understanding of the earth. And then on the third day, the land and vegetation were made. And then on day 4, the sun, the moon, the stars. And it doesn't it isn't until day 4 that we actually get our definition of a day as we understand it, because we understand a day as one complete revolution on the Earth's axis as the Earth is revolving around the sun. This takes about 24 hours. It's not until day 4 that we actually get an actual understanding of what a day even is. And then on day 5, the birds which dwell in the firmament above, and then the fish that dwell in the waters below are made. And then likewise, lastly, on day 6, the animals were made, culminating in mankind. And so, as you can see, the whole left-hand side are in day 1, 2, and 3. God is creating a space, whether it be the heavens, the waters, or the land. And then on days 4, 5, and 6, which is why I have it organized in this manner, God fills that space. So he fills the heavens with the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the celestial bodies that we see in the night sky. Likewise, the same is true for the waters or the land as well. And in reference to show this ordering of creation, I cite 1 Clement chapter 20, verse 11. Now, the epistle of Clement's epistle to Corinth is not canon in our Bible, but it definitely is need to be referenced and looked at and read because it's the writing of a saint. And so he states that all these things the creator and master of the universe ordered to exist in peace and harmony. And so as you can see, basically the whole of the 6 days of creation are a path from chaos to order, as God orders it through by creating spaces and then filling those spaces with more and more complex beings and entities. And the entirety of chapter 20 of 1 Clement speaks to this. And I've actually provided it for you on the handout for your own referencing. And effectively, this little snippet summarizes much of what the entire chapter is trying to say. And so this is an image of the ancient idea of what the earth looked like. So you see the earth and the firmament above, where it has a dome, where the waters above the earth were. You actually get reference to this in the Noah story, where it says that the firmament opened up. Basically, this dome opened up, and the waters that were above the firmament came in and flooded the earth. So this is a further showing of that ancient understanding. Likewise, you have the waters that were dwelling under the earth, as I said before, and the pillars of the earth. The pillars of the earth are actually referenced in Job chapter 38, which I provided for you as well. And in this, God is basically talking to Job and saying, you don't actually understand why I do the things that I do, and you couldn't possibly understand. And he's stating various things like, when the stars were made and all my angels praised me with a loud voice, and basically, and I shut up the gates with the sea with gates, when it rushed out, coming forth out its mother's womb, and various other things like, where wast thou when I founded the earth? Tell me now if thou hast knowledge. Of various, those were not said in order by the way, sorry about that, if to confuse anybody. I just picked a couple selections from chapter 38 for stating that, of talking about the pillars of the earth and the formation of it. And this is effectively where that imagery you see in the first chapter of Genesis comes from, is from this ancient understanding. I've also linked in your handout an article that where I got this image from, which goes into a little bit more detail than I am here about this ancient understanding of the cosmology of the earth. Furthermore, another little interesting factoid is that I believe the first reference to the fact that the earth is round can be found in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22, where it's stated, it is he who possesses the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. It is he who stretches out the heaven like a vault and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. And this is actually pretty incredible, and shows also that the circular nature of the diagram. So let's talk about a really cool theologic term called theologumenon. And so basically, this is defined as private opinions of the Holy Fathers or teachers of the Church on questions that not have been precisely defined and accepted by the whole Church. This can be dealing with how questions, because there's no definitive how within the Orthodox Church of how creation occurred. And so these many statements done by ancient saints made statements and writings using the scientific framework of their day and age. St. Basil did this, so did St. Gregory of Nyssa, St. John Chrysostom. They used the scientific understanding and the understanding of their time whenever writing about creation. And so this needs to be understood whenever reading and looking at the writings of the saints. Just like the ancient understanding of how the earth looked to ancient people appears in the Bible, especially in the first 2 chapters of Genesis, as well as later parts of Genesis, as well, into explaining to the people about these theological truths. And so something to be said about Theologomenon is that it must be rejected if it contradicts with patristic consensus and or an ecumenical council. A really good example of this is with St. Augustine of Hippo, with his views on original sin, which the Orthodox Church categorically rejects. He had the idea in his writings that everyone was born sinful and that we retain the guilt and condemnation from Adam's original sin. In the Orthodox Church, we actually have the concept of ancestral sin, where we bear the adverse effects of Adam's sin. A good example of this can be seen in, say, a father who is an alcoholic, who drinks away all of his family's money, and his children are left with the after effects of his father's sin and the lifestyle that his father had. They themselves are not guilty of their father's alcoholism, but they still have to deal with the effects of it. And so Metropolitan Callistus Ware, another modern theologian, writes, patristic wheat needs to be distinguished from patristic chaff. And so basically, we do need to be very selective and analyze the writings of the fathers with a critical mind and not just an overly literalistic mind, and enter more deeply into the inner spirit of the fathers and acquire a patristic mind so they understand what the truths they're trying to state through the understanding of the science of their time. And so here are some writings of the fathers that I hope will elaborate on the connection between the Big Bang Theory as well as Orthodox understanding of it. And so St. Athanasius, when writing on the Incarnation, states, the distinctiveness of things argues not a spontaneous generation, but a prevenient cause. And from that cause, we can apprehend God, the designer and maker of all. And so in seeing this, we understand that God is the cause of it all. It's not just some sort of random happenstance or event, that God in his wisdom caused the world to be formed and caused creation to occur and guides it by his hand and with his wisdom. And this can be seen with the Big Bang Theory in that God spoke, and in an instant, the light was created, the whole of the matter was created, and it was ordered throughout time by himself. And likewise, St. Maximus the Confessor talks of the logoi of creation. What do I mean by this? The term logoi is a plural of the term logos, which has a lot of different definitions, some of which could be word, reason, meaning, principle, or definition. Likewise, whenever I reference chapter 1 of the Gospel according to John, the term word could also be used as logos. So the logos of God, which is the Son of God. And so when he writes, the one logos is the many logoi, and the many logoi are the one logos. In stating this, he is showing that the meaning of the entire universe can be found in Christ and one's participation and connection to him. And basically that God pulls us and just shows us the way to salvation and wants us to be and participate in him and guides us to that if we let him. And so likewise, in one of the articles, in an article that I provided for you, the author of that explains that in reference to Maximus's concept of the logoi of creation, that they are guiding the process of actualization of the universe's natural potential, and that God makes use of the creation's natural energy, the natural laws that he himself institutes and upholds to form and shape creation in the manner that he so chose. Furthermore, continuing on, St. Gregory of Nyssa states that God alone knows the foundation of creation, which is also further exemplified in chapter 38 of Job. And furthermore, Father Florowski, who I've referenced in the last class on talking about St. Gregory, states that the biblical narration as found in Genesis is just a record of Moses' contemplation upon Mount Sinai and not necessarily the rational conjecture of some human mind. So basically, this is trying to get at that Moses did not was not at the beginning of time with a iPhone with his video camera out, just recording God as he created the world and then wrote it down, but it's a more mystical contemplation upon Sinai that was through God's revelation of the past and of his wisdom. And so likewise, and furthermore stating this, what St. Gregory taught on creation, he states that all of matter comes into being instantaneously and in totality, much like it's stated with the Big Bang, and that the entirety of the created universe was born from this initial event, but that the individual manifestations of what's seen today are realized according to a natural order and succession over a period of time, which is exactly what we see in science. This is exactly what occurs in the Big Bang Theory, with an initial creative act where all of the stuff, all the matter of the universe is created, and then through time is formed and shaped into the forms that we see and observe and interact with today. Likewise, St. Augustine of Hippo in his Confessions, specifically book 11 of his Confessions. This is a little bit of a longer quotation, so I'm not going to read it all out, but he's basically talking about time. And in the gist of what this quotation is stating is he's effectively stating that time before creation has no meaning, that there's no real before because we are bound by time and that our lives exist in time. And science will actually say that as well, because the space and time that we exist in are interlinked and that we ourselves as created beings are bound by time. God himself exists outside of time. And so questions of what happened before, what God was doing before creation, are effectively meaningless because we don't really have a concept of before, because before implies time when it didn't exist then. And so God is eternal and exists outside of time. So let's talk about the age of the earth, which can be, people get very militant over at times. And so some people have a concept of the earth as a short earth, as it not being as long as science predicts it to be, based off of a variety of observations that I mentioned previously. And so one of the primary points of evidence to this short earth is the use of biblical genealogies. And so according to using the biblical genealogies and the numbering within the Septuagint, one would arrive at about a 7,000-year-old earth. And according to early Jewish tradition, creation was thought to have occurred at 3,761 BC. Now, this has a couple of problems with it. First and foremost, the numbering in the Bible has more meaning beyond literal. It has theologic meaning beyond just the literal numbering of what something is. This can be seen effectively within the genealogies of Christ as given in Matthew and Luke's gospel. And so in this way, genealogies are very fluid based off of what the author is trying to intend and mean based off of the ordering, the number of people that are present. For this matter, if you look at the genealogies of Christ in Matthew and Luke, there are different people in it and different names. This does not mean that one's better than the other or that one was wrong. It's just that the author's intent in using these genealogies was different. And so in this way, genealogies can be seen as a contemporary statements regarding group and individual identity, and that they are basically a filing system for people. And so they're not like today's genealogies. Now, if I were to look at a genealogy today, I would want to know every single person that was on there. And I could use the genealogy to possibly track various traits, like or various medical conditions. Like in my family, I could track the trait of red hair and track it throughout my family to sort of see who has this specific trait, and you can actually determine a lots of things for that. But in the ancient times, the ancient usage of genealogies wasn't this, and it was not in this manner. Furthermore, some people and some saints have actually written concerning the age of the earth, and this would very much fall within the realm of theologumenon. Furthermore, one of which was Saint Ephrem the Syrian, who thought that the days of creation were 24 hours long. And so, in a quotation from him, both the day and the night of the first day continue for 12 hours each. This is definitely not a dogmatic position or a dogmatic statement of the church. It's definitely a private opinion of this saint upon the age of the earth and the duration, which, in taking a look at the entirety of the evidence, both secular and spiritual, there's much more evidence to the contrary that the days of creation were a literary days of organization, as is stated by St. Augustine of Hippo and the writings of St. Gregory of Nyssa into the regards to the instantaneous creation and then the ordering throughout time. Likewise, to summarize all the points that I've said today, the cosmos does have a definite beginning in time. Science and religion very much state this. And furthermore, God is the cause and the ordering of creation. It's not through random chance or probability, but God had a hand in it. And this is also seen in Psalm 103 or 104, depending on whether you're using the Septuagint numbering or not, and shows that it was done in wisdom. This psalm likewise is read every single time Vespers. And you can hear that on Saturday if you were able to come to Vespers. Furthermore, science, whether it be ancient or modern, has not been dogmatized, nor should it be. Our understanding of science changes based off new observations and techniques that may not be exist in ancient times or in the future. So our fundamental understanding of the cosmos may actually change somewhat if we, with new observations and new tests and studies, to develop and obtain a greater understanding. And so in this manner, creation has occurred from chaos to order, and that God has ordered it all by his hand and wisdom. And so theologumena on creation are extremely present, and many of the writings of the saints are based upon the science of their day and age. And so in conclusion, the Big Bang Theory and Orthodoxy's view on creation are not in opposition. They actually work quite well together in showing the creation of the world, of the how, while theology shows the why. And when looked at together, they elevate each other to new and greater heights. And so, are there any questions? So in the meantime, while people are asking questions, I'm going to show my references so that if anybody is watching a recording of this, they can pause and see my citations, as well as photo credits. All right, any questions?
We need a crickets chirping sound here.
Maybe I just explained it that well. So does anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and just chime in. Or you could put the message in the chat and I can look at the chat if there's any question. I don't see any questions in the chat right now of anybody including them. Are there any questions?
Hey, Ian, it's John Assif.
How you doing, John?
Hey there, buddy. Hey, I don't have any questions, but is it possible for you to put your presentation up in thumbnail format so we can just look at the slides and see which slide we want to talk about so we can?
Yeah, actually, I can do that. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So let's start at the beginning. I'm just going to slowly scroll down and just fire away if you have any questions. Tell me if this is too small, John, for you to see.
If it was bigger, it'd be nice, but I don't want to trouble it or take time away from anyone else, you know what I mean?
Is that better?
Yeah, that's really nice, Ian. Yes.
That's about as I can actually. So let's go on. I'll start again at the beginning. Alternatively, I could start the presentation over and just slowly click through the slides.
And I guess we'll send it out in a recording too, aren't we, Ian?
Yes. This recording will be posted to YouTube just like the last one was. So you can watch and rewatch at your heart's content.
I think after I read it and digest it, I'll probably have questions next week, you know?
Well, next week we're not having a lesson. We're skipping next week because as of the time of this recording, Next week will be the first week of Great Lent. So instead of having a class, we'll be in church. I hope to see everybody there, or whether in person or digitally. And then the week after that is the Feast of the Annunciation. So we'll be skipping that week as well and having church instead. And then on April the 1st, it will be the next class, and we'll be talking about the Big Bang Theory. Not big. Oh, geez, sorry, Freudian slip there. My bad. We'll be talking about evolution.
Hey, Ian, have you personally ever had any dialogue with anyone that feels that science and faith oppose each other, or that the Big Bang opposes faith? And what is that dialogue like? It'd be interesting to see two people talk about opposing views, you know?
Not recently, but in my youth, I went to a Protestant elementary school, which definitely did teach creationist as like creation science as the science of that. And I remember on a field trip growing up, they did take us to the Creation Science Museum. This is when I was a kid, so I don't actually remember all the things that were talked about. I thought it was kind of a cool place whenever I was a kid. I thought it was really interesting. Although I don't have that many definite strong memories of it or that much dialogue between people. I also, partly because I don't like arguing, and when sometimes people get very militant and really want to argue, and I just don't like arguing. I prefer dialogue, like you said. I don't feel like anybody's minds are changed in a debate. That just because I could argue something better, that you're immediately swayed to my side. I don't think that really works.
You know, I was a little bit late to your class tonight, and I was in and out of some of the slides, getting settled in here when I got home. But like, did any of your presentation that I didn't hear talk about creation as it relates to the rest of the like other planets and extraterrestrial and all of that? Was there any?
I don't talk about extraterrestrials. I talk about the planets in that from the point of creation, and that they would be made on day 4 of according to the book of Genesis, and the same way of how stars and galaxies were formed a set number of years after the Big Bang Theory, after the Big Bang. I do talk about that. I don't touch on extraterrestrials because we don't really have evidence of their existence. In science, there's something that's known as the Fermi paradox, which is basically a mathematical equation trying to figure out how many spacefaring civilizations that there should be out there. And I haven't looked at it recently. But it's you can look it up, and I could probably find something and send it to you if you want, about the Fermi paradox. It's talking about why aren't there aliens, or why aren't there these other extraterrestrials from a scientific perspective. And there's a couple of different. Obviously, I'm not trying to sound like I'm the History Channel and talk about ancient aliens here.
Be interested to know if our faith aligned with, you know, lower forms of life in the galaxies. You know, I think we all kind of wonder that on some level. You know.
I definitely, I don't know, honestly. I really don't. I don't know if there's lower forms or higher forms. I know there's current expeditions to Mars, as there was just a recent rover in the news that was launched to Mars to look for evidence of life, also evidence of water. I don't really know much about that.
Okay.
Honestly, I really don't. Within the Orthodox framework either, how that would fit in, whether life on other planets would or wouldn't. I don't see it as probably an opposition if there was life on other planets, and that God created the entirety of the created universe for us. The beauty of the stars, the beauty of of Earth, and that you've created the entire universe to share in his love with us and out of love. So there being other animals on other planets probably wouldn't be against it, but I really don't know. That's something that would definitely be within the realm of Theologumenon that I discussed. That's definitely a holy opinion, and not to say that I'm holy or anything, far from it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for the input, Ian.
I'll make some for you though. I'm put butter on there.
Was there a question?
No, I just said thank you for the input.
No. Oh, sorry. There was something. I think that might have been in the background of your house. My bad. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns?
Very good lecture, Ian. Thoroughly enjoyed the parts I was able to hear, man. Thanks for doing this for us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ian. Hey, this is Amanda Cato. I just couldn't think of any questions, but really good presentation. I enjoyed it. I actually went to a Protestant evangelical university. I remember having a science professor that taught some things that are similar along the lines of what you were talking about, and it was very controversial. So I enjoyed the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. There's definitely, like I talked about last time, there's this overarching idea that people feel that science and faith are in opposition to each other, which I hope that this lecture series will try and correct that and show that they work quite well together. And science is a part of the created world. God has allowed scientific thought to grow to the point that it is for a reason, and that we can use it, and we can use science and the technology that we have to glorify God. Oftentimes we don't, and that's due to our own sin, but we can and we should. Oh, I see a chat. Any question in the chat? Oh, so the question from, I don't know if this person wants me to say their name or not, is that so humans were not made until every animal was made. So in the beginning in Genesis, there's two creation stories. The first in chapter 1 carrying into chapter 2 is the 6 days of creation, as we stated, where, and I'll go back to that slide actually. Oh, give me a second. Sorry. Actually, sorry. Here, this is a good one. Okay, so basically this is effectively a synopsis of what was created on each day. And so in the first chapter of Genesis, the last of the created order of all the creation is mankind. Man is effectively seen as the crown of creation, the culmination of everything that came before it. And this makes sense because man is both body and soul, material and spiritual, and that he is basically has part of the spiritual reality and the physical reality, and because God is made of this way. And so in that manner, man is seen in as being formed last. But if you look at chapter 2 of Genesis, man is actually made first, and then and actually specifically Adam is made first, and then the rest of the created world is made, like the animals were made, and then finally Eve is made last from, I believe, one of his ribs. While in the beginning, in the first chapter of Genesis, both man and woman are made simultaneously. And so that's why I was trying to say that it's not necessarily a literal accounting, and that it shows more of the theology of how God created from order to chaos and the organization. We'll talk more about the creation of man specifically next time in the theory of evolution. I sort of wanted to touch primarily on the cosmos in this one, of the big picture of creation of the cosmos and the created world. And I'll be primarily touching upon life, and specifically mankind, in the on the class on the theory of evolution. So I hope this answers your question. Thank you for asking it. All right, are there any other questions? If there are no further questions, then next time we'll be talking about the theory of evolution, and that will be in a couple of weeks because we're going to be taking a break. I urge you to look at the schedule in your bulletin to be able to know when the next class is. I'll be sending out an email closer to that time with some handouts that I've provided that I will be providing for you. And I hope everybody enjoyed today's class. And if there's no other questions, then we'll just call it quits for the day. thank you for coming, and I hope that you found it very edifying and you learned something. Oh, I see a question or comment in the chat. Oh, thank you as well. I appreciate it.